"Come, Amberlyn, be honest with your friends," said Lord Rushmere, tipping his chair back. 6 weeks married to a wool merchant's daughter. Are you fond of her, or are you not? "Fond," said the Duke of Amberlyn, without looking up from the billiard table, and he heard his own voice do the drawling thing it had done since he was 19, and had wanted very badly to be thought untouchable. "She is merely a dowry to me, Rushmere. £80,000 with a pleasant voice attached. One does not grow fond of a bank draft." Calendar laughed, Rushmere laughed. Dominic played his shot, and the ball dropped, and in the small, clean silence after it he heard, from the doorway behind him, the very faint sound of china being set down on a table. He turned round. His wife was standing just inside the door of the billiard room in a gray-green evening gown with her hair very simply dressed, holding the Amberlyn rent ledger against her side with one arm. On the table beside the door she had put down a plate, a seed cake, cut on the everyday blue china. Nobody moved. "Emmeline," he said. "Forgive me." Her voice was perfectly pleasant. "I did not mean to interrupt a game. Mr. Bardsey has finished the Michaelmas figures, and there are 2 errors in the second column which I have marked in pencil, not ink, in case I am wrong." She laid the ledger on the table beside the plate, squarely, aligning its edge with the edge of the wood. "Your grandmother told me this afternoon that you were extremely fond of seed cake as a boy, and that nobody has made it in this house since your mother died. Mrs. Ray had the receipt in a book. It is a little dry. She says the oven at Amberlyn has never been right." "Duchess," said Rushmere on his feet, scarlet to the ears. "Duchess, Lord Rushmere, Mr. Calendar." She curtsied to them beautifully. "Good night, gentlemen. Do not let the fire go out. This room is very cold in October, and the chimney draws badly." And she went away down the corridor, and her step did not hurry at all. Dominic stood at the billiard table with the cue in his hand. "She may not have heard," Calendar said, into the silence. "She heard every word," said Dominic. He did not go after her that night. This was the first of a series of decisions he would spend a year regretting, and he made it for a reason that seemed, at the time, sound. That a woman in that condition wants an hour to herself, that anything he said at 11 o'clock at night would be worse than what he had already said, and that in the morning he would put it right properly, at leisure, in the breakfast room, where they were on good terms. He sat up until 2 instead, in the library, with the ledger open in front of him. She had found the 2 errors. They were in Bardsey's edition of the Threve Cottage rents, and they came to £11.14, and on the other side, to £96, the second one in the estate's favour, so that she had gone to the trouble of pointing out a mistake that had been quietly enriching her husband. There was a pencil note in the margin in a small, firm hand. The figure for arrears at Threve had not moved in 5 quarters, which either meant nobody there had fallen behind, which was improbable in a mining village, or that somebody had stopped writing the arrears down. Dominic read that note 3 times. He had been Duke of Amberlyn for 4 years, and for 4 years the estate had been eating him alive. His father had left him Amberlyn Abbey with a leaking roof over 11 acres of stone, 4 mortgages, a coal mine at Threve that had been driven too deep and too cheap, an unfinished ornamental water that had cost £19,000 and drowned 2 fields, and a settled reputation for grandeur which Dominic had inherited along with everything else and had worn at first, because it was expected, and then because it was the only garment in the house without holes in it. By his 35th year, the position was arithmetic. The mortgages could be carried for perhaps 2 more seasons. Then the Threve lands would go, and after Threve the Abbey. Mr. Josiah Hartright had come to him in February with a proposal, and had made it in 11 minutes, standing up, with his hat in his hand, and his boots planted on the obeson like a man who had bought the carpet, and knew what it had cost. Hartright of Kelbrook, worsted spinner, 3 mills, a wharf at Goole, a fortune got in 22 years and not 1 penny of it inherited. He had 1 surviving daughter. He wanted her to be a duchess. He would settle £80,000, 60 of it free of any trust whatsoever, and he would pay off the Threve mortgage out of his own pocket as a wedding present. And he wanted in exchange precisely one thing, which he stated without any embarrassment at all: that his girl should be treated as a lady in the house she went into, and by the man who took her. "I'll not have her sneered at, your grace," he had said. "Money can buy a coronet. It can't buy a husband's manners. So I'll ask you straight, and you may tell me straight. Can you be civil to her for 40 years?" Dominic had said that he could. He had meant it. That was the part he could not get past afterward. He had met Emmeline Hartright 4 times before the wedding and had liked her better each time. She was 26, not a girl. She was quiet in company and not quiet at all when the company had gone. She read blue books for pleasure. She had a low, sudden laugh that he had gone out of his way, on the 3rd occasion, to produce twice. He had gone into the marriage thinking himself lucky, and had told nobody so, because telling people so was not the manner of the Duke of Amberlyn. 6 weeks. 6 weeks of walking with her in the mornings and dining with her, and finding her at the end of the long gallery looking at his mother's portrait, and coming to like her handwriting in the housekeeping book. 6 weeks, and then a friend had tipped a chair back and asked him a question, and rather than say the true thing that he was becoming, at 35, ridiculously and inconveniently attached to his own wife, he had said something clever. In the morning she was at the breakfast table before him, pouring his coffee. "Good morning, your grace." "Emmeline, about last night." "The Threve arrears," she said pleasantly, passing him the cup. "I have been thinking about them, and I believe I have it. Mr. Bardsey has not been recording them because they are not being collected. There is a man there called Hebel who has been paying them into his own hand and giving the colliers extra time, out of kindness, and hoping it would come right. I do not think he is a thief. I think he is frightened. Your bread is on the left. I asked for it toasted. You had it toasted every day last week and then not at all on Thursday, and I could not tell whether that was preference or accident." Dominic set down the cup. "Emmeline, look at me." She looked at him. Her face was calm, attentive, and entirely closed, like a well-made door. "What I said in the billiard room was contemptible. It was said among gentlemen in a gentleman's room, and I walked into it uninvited," she said. "I have no complaint of any kind. It was untrue. Your grace." And here, for 1 second, something came up behind the door and looked out at him, and it was not anger, it was pity, and it was very much worse. "You had no reason to lie to Lord Rushmere. He is your friend. A man does not lie to his friends about his wife when there is nothing in it for him. And you said it easily. That is the thing I have been thinking about all night, not the words. You did not have to search for it. It was simply the sentence that was there. It was vanity. I would rather be thought cold than be thought to have grown fond of £80,000 with a pleasant voice attached." She smiled at him, and it was a beautiful, courteous, dreadful smile. "There. Now it is said aloud in daylight, and we need never speak of it again. Will you take the second cup? You always do." And that was the beginning of the year. She did not sulk. She did not weep, or absent herself, or make one scene, and if she had, Dominic thought afterward, he could have dealt with it, because a scene is a door left ajar. What she did instead was to become, from that morning, the most flawless Duchess of Amberlyn in living memory. She came down to breakfast. She managed the house so well that the servants began, within a month, to go to her rather than to him. She was gracious to callers, remembered their children's names, was kind to his terrifying grandmother, wrote his difficult letters better than he wrote them, and sat opposite him at dinner every night for a year discussing the estate, the harvest, the roof, the mine, the parish, the weather, and nothing whatsoever else. She was warm to every living soul at Amberlyn. She was warm to the under-gardener's mother. She was warm to Rushmere, who came in November to grovel and was forgiven in 11 seconds, and went away liking her so much that he stopped speaking to Dominic for 6 weeks out of sheer indignation. To her husband she was unfailingly, immovably courteous. And Dominic discovered, that winter, the particular hell of a house where nothing is wrong. There was nothing to apologize for a second time. There was no quarrel to make up. Every morning she poured his coffee and asked after his ride, and every night she said good night to him at the top of the stairs with her candle in her hand, and turned to the left, and he turned to the right, and the whole length of Amberlyn Abbey lay between them like a country. By February she had reorganized the Threve rents, and by April she had saved the mine. Dominic watched it happen, and could not, at first, believe what he was watching. She went down to Threve herself, in a hired gig with Mr. Bardsey and a notebook, and she came back with the whole of it. Hebel, the frightened underagent, who had been carrying 11 families' arrears in his own pocket for 5 quarters, because their men had been put on short time when the lower workings began to make water. The pumps, which were 2 30-year-old engines doing the work of 3. The seams, which were sound. And the £740 of unrecorded arrears, which she proposed to write off entirely. Write off, Dominic repeated. Write off, not forgive funded. Charge it to the improvement account against the new pumping engine, because that is honestly what it is. Those men lost their wages to the water, and we lost their rents to the water, and it is one debt, and it belongs to the machinery, not to their cottages. She turned the notebook round so he could read it. My father did this at Kelbrook in the bad year. If you take a man's arrears off him, he works for you for 20 years. If you take his cottage off him, you get 11 shillings and an enemy. And the engine. £410 from Cadwallader of Wigan, with a warranty, and he will take 150 of it in coal at the pit price over 2 years, which is money we should never see anyway. She closed the book. I have not ordered it. It is your mine. But I should like to say that if the lower workings drown, you lose the whole Threve field, which is the only thing on this estate that makes money, and you will have to sell the Abbey by Lady Day next. Dominic looked at her, across the library table. Order it, he said. It is your Emmeline. He heard his own voice go rough and steadied it. In 4 years I have had 3 agents and a London firm of surveyors on that mine, and not one of them told me what you have just told me in 9 minutes. Order the engine. Order 2, if Cadwallader will carry the second. For a fraction of a second the door opened, and she looked pleased, and she was 27 years old and pleased, and then she said, "Thank you, your grace," and it shut. Her father's 80,000 did not go where Josiah Hartright had assumed it would go. Emmeline would not let it. Dominic had expected, half-hoped, in a shameful part of himself, that the money would be spent, that it would soak away into the roof and the mortgages and be gone, and the thing would be over and unmentionable. Instead, she put it to work. 22,000 cleared the 2 worst mortgages. 9,000 went into the roof, which was done properly in lead by a firm from York, so that it would not need doing again in his lifetime. 11,000 went into the Threve workings and the new engines. She drained the ornamental water, and turned the 2 drowned fields back to pasture, which cost £400 and returned 60 a year. And she remarked, standing on the bank in the rain, that it was the first £19,000 anybody at Amberlyn had ever got back at 2.5%. The rest she left invested and did not touch. By midsummer of that second year, the Amberlyn estate was, for the first time since the 7th Duke, solvent. Dominic's bankers wrote to him with a warmth bordering on the indecent. His grandmother, the Dowager Lady Adeline, who was 79, and had disliked the marriage so violently that she had refused to attend it, took Emmeline's arm at the Amberlyn tenants' dinner in July, and walked the whole length of the barn on it, in front of 200 people, at a pace calculated to make sure that every single one of them saw. Afterward, in the drawing-room, she said to her grandson, "You are a fool, Dominic. I am aware of it." "Are you, I wonder?" Lady Adeline arranged her shawl. "I have watched that young woman for a year and a half. She has mended this house, she has mended your finances, and she has been so uniformly delightful to me, who told your mother's cousin at the time that I would not sit down to dinner with a spinner's daughter, that I am now obliged to be fond of her, which at my age is inconvenient." She fixed him with the pale Amberlyn eyes. "And in 18 months I have never once seen her touch you. Not her hand on your arm going in to dinner. She puts her fingers on your sleeve, which is not the same thing, and you know it is not. What did you do?" "I said something." "What did you say?" "I said that she was merely a dowry to me," said Dominic. "In the billiard room, to Rushmere. She was in the doorway with a seed cake." His grandmother was silent for a while. "Well," she said at last, "then you have a great deal of work in front of you, and you had better begin, because a woman who is that polite for that long is not waiting. She is packing." The other thing that happened that summer was Lady Sybil Vance. She came into the county in August, to her brother's, and she came to Amberlyn on the 2nd day, and Dominic, who had been very nearly engaged to her at 27, and had escaped by the sheer good luck of her marrying an older and richer man, understood within 4 minutes exactly what she had come for. She was charming to Emmeline. She was charming in the specific, deadly way of a woman establishing a private understanding over another woman's head. Little references to old summers, to a house party in Kent, to a nickname. And then, at last, turning to Emmeline with immense kindness and saying, "You must not mind us, Duchess. Dominic and I have known each other since before you were out. It is like a family, and how clever you are about the mine, everybody says so. My brother's agent tells me you have quite a head for figures. It must be from your father's side. I am told trade requires it." Dominic said, "Sybil." "Yes, my dear. My wife's head for figures has saved this estate. Mine did not, and my father's did not, and yours would not, and if the whole of Amberlyn stands in 50 years, it will be because a spinner's daughter from Kelbrook drained a lake and bought 2 pumping engines from a man in Wigan." He rang the bell. "You will be wanting your carriage. The road by the mill is up. Go round by Thrieve, and look at the engines as you pass. They are the handsomest things in this parish." When she had gone, Emmeline stood by the window for a moment. "You need not have done that," she said. "I have been managed by better women than Lady Sybil Vance. My father's trade brought me a great many afternoons like this one." "I did not do it for you," said Dominic. "I did it because it was true, and because I have spent 18 months learning what it costs to say the clever thing instead of the true one, and I find I have no more credit to spend." She turned and looked at him then, actually looked, for the first time in a year and a half, with the door not quite shut. "Thank you," she said, and it was not the courteous voice. He lay awake that night for 4 hours, on his own side of the house, in an agony of hope, which he had not felt since he was a boy. The water came into the lower Threve workings on the 11th of September, at 3 in the afternoon, and 19 men were below. Dominic was 11 miles away at the quarter sessions. He was told at 5:30 and rode it in 50 minutes, and came into the pit yard at dark to find it lit like a fair and running like a ship. She had been there since 4. Emmeline had come across from the Abbey in the gig at the first word, and she had Hebel told him this afterward, weeping, without shame, in front of 11 other men, done 4 things in the first hour. She had sent both the Abbey's carriage horses to Wigan with a note to Cadwallader to send his fitter, and every length of pipe he could load, at any price. She had sent the 2nd gig for the surgeon at Averil, and the 3rd for the Threve curate. She had ordered the Abbey kitchens opened, the great copper lit, and every blanket in the house brought down, and had commandeered the tithe barn at the pit head as a place for the women to wait out of the rain, with braziers, because she had seen at Kelbrook what it does to a village when the women stand in the road for 9 hours. And she had put herself at a trestle table with a lantern and a list of 19 names, and she had refused to leave it. Dominic worked at the shaft head from 6 that evening until 9 the next morning with his coat off. It was not, in the end, the worst kind of night. The water came in above the men rather than below them, and the new upper engine held, and at 6:20 in the morning the first of them came up. All 19 came up, 2 with broken bones and 1 who was never quite right in the chest again, and 19 names crossed off a list at a trestle table by a woman in a ruined gray-green gown with her hair down her back, and her hands black to the wrist. He found her at 9:30 sitting on an upturned tub in the tithe barn, with a mug of tea she had not drunk, and she looked up at him, and there was nothing courteous in her face, at all nothing but exhaustion, and the wild relief of a person who has been holding 19 lives on a piece of paper all night. "All of them," she said. "Dominic, all of them." It was the first time she had used his name since the 6th week of their marriage. He knelt down on the barn floor in front of the tub, filthy, and took both her black hands in his, and could not speak for a moment. "I have to say something to you," he said. "Not now." "Then when?" "Not now," she said, and her voice cracked. "Please, I cannot do it now. Take me home." He carried her out to the gig. She was asleep before they reached the lodge. 9 days later, she came into the library with a folded paper in her hand, and asked whether he had a half-hour. "Of course. I have had Mr. Lloyd draw something, and I want you to read it without saying anything until the end." She put it on the desk. "It is a deed of separation." The clock on the chimney-piece went on very loudly. Dominic read it. She had drawn it as she did everything, cleanly and without malice, that the Duchess of Amberlyn should reside at Kelbrook or such other place as she might choose, that she should retain the £20,000 still in her own trust and no more, that she made no claim upon the estate, the 80,000 being a gift already given and spent, that she would attend at Amberlyn twice yearly, at the tenants' dinner, and at Christmas, so that no scandal should attach to him, that there should be no application to any court, and no word spoken by either of them, ever, to anybody. "You have made yourself an allowance of nothing," he said. "You have given me back the house, the mine, the roof, the engines, and the £80,000, and you propose to go home to your father's and come here twice a year to protect my reputation." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I have done what I came to do," said Emmeline, "and I cannot do the rest of it." "What is the rest of it?" "Sit at that table for 40 more years," she said, "opposite a man who is fond of me now I know you are. I am not a fool. I have watched it happen, and it has been the hardest thing I have ever had to watch, and never once be able to tell whether he came to it because of me, or because I mended his roof." Her voice was very quiet. "You said the sentence easily, Dominic. That is the whole of it. It was the sentence that was there. And every time you are kind to me now I hear it, and I think, yes, of course, the dowry has turned out well." "I will not sign it today," Dominic said. "I am not refusing. I am asking for a term. Give me until Christmas 12 weeks. If on Christmas Eve you still wish it, I will sign it in front of Lloyd and put you in the carriage myself, and never say one word against it to any living soul, and you shall have Kelbrook and your peace and my silence for the rest of your life." Emmeline stood with her hands folded. "And what will you do with 12 weeks?" "I do not entirely know yet," he said. "I know what I will not do. I will not follow you about the house being charming, and I will not send you anything out of a shop, and I will not once ask you to think better of me, because you have had 2 years of my being fond of you, and it has only made things worse." He put the deed back in her hands. Keep it where you can reach it." She took it. She looked at him for a long moment with an expression he could not read. 12 weeks, she said. He went to Kelbrook in the first of them, without telling her, and it was the worst hour of his adult life. Josiah Hartright received him in a room full of patterned books, with a bolt of worsted on the table, and he did not offer his hand. "She's written to me," he said. "Not about you. She writes every week, and there's never a word about you in it, and I've been 2 years reading between the lines of my own daughter's letters. So say what you've come for." "I came to tell you what I said." "I know what you said." Hartright's face did not move. "She told me last Christmas. It took her 4 days to get it out, and she cried like she did when her mother went. Merely a dowry. £80,000 with a pleasant voice attached." Dominic said nothing. There was nothing. "I asked you one thing, Your Grace." The old man's hands were flat on the worsted. "Not love. I'm not a fool. I wasn't buying love. You can't buy it, and I never tried. I asked could you be civil to her for 40 years. And you gave me your word standing on that carpet of yours, and you kept it for 6 weeks. Yes. And now the mine's saved, and the roof's on, and you find you've grown fond of her, and you've come up to Yorkshire to tell her old father so." Hartright turned away to the window. "Do you know what she was, before you had her? She was the cleverest woman in the West Riding. She kept my books from 19. She sat in on the Goole Wharf negotiation when she was 22, and got me £1,100 I'd have left on the table. And she'd have gone on being that and been happy, and I put a coronet on her instead because I was a vain man who'd come up out of nothing and wanted to see my girl bow to nobody." His voice went thick. "So there's 2 of us wanting to be forgiven, and she's only got the one heart to do it with, and I've had mine already. Take it slow with her." "How?" said Dominic. "Tell me how. I am asking you honestly, because I have never in my life had to make anybody believe anything." Josiah Hartright turned round. "She doesn't want telling," he said. "She's had 30 years of men telling her things. Go home and pay for it, lad. Not with money. Money's the one currency she's stopped trusting, and you're the reason. Pay with something you'd rather keep." He rode back over the moor to Amberlyn and thought about it for 4 days, and then he sent for Mr. Lloyd. "I want a deed drawn," he said. "The 3 field. The mine, the 2 engines, the whole of the coal, the cottages, the wayleave, and the 400 acres, conveyed to the Duchess of Amberlyn absolutely, in her own right to her separate use, free from any control of mine, with power to sell, lease, mortgage, or give it away as she pleases, and to take the whole of the income of it wherever in the world she chooses to live." Mr. Lloyd's pen stopped. "Your Grace, The Three Field is the only part of this estate that earns. I am aware. If the Duchess were to remove to Yorkshire and take the income with her, the Amberlyn estate would show a surplus of approximately £300 a year on 11,000 acres. You would be, forgive me, a solvent pauper. I would be a duke with a house that does not leak, living on the goodwill of a woman in Yorkshire, said Dominic. Yes, that is the arrangement I am proposing. Draw it. May I ask why? Because I told a room full of gentlemen that my wife was a dowry, he said, and there is only one way I can think of to make that sentence impossible, and it is to arrange matters so that from this Christmas forward, if either of us is a dowry to the other, it is not her. Draw it, Lloyd. Have it executed and enrolled and send her a copy by the same post as mine, and do not put one word of explanation with it. He did not tell her. He never once mentioned it. She had the copy on the 9th of November, and she came to the library door with it in her hand and her face white, and Dominic looked up and said, "Was there something about the Michaelmas figures?" And she stood there for perhaps 8 seconds and then said, "No, nothing," and went away. The dinner in Hanover Row was on the 29th of November. Rushmere's, 30 at table, and Calendar there, and Lady Sybil Vance, and half the men Dominic had known since Eton. He waited until the cloth was drawn, and the room had that loose, warm, pleased with itself quality it gets at 11 o'clock, and then he stood up. "You will forgive me," he said. "It is not a toast. It is a correction, and it will take 2 minutes, and Rushmere has heard the beginning of it before." The table quieted, delighted, expecting a joke. 2 years ago in the billiard room at Amberlyn, Rushmere asked me whether I was fond of my wife. I said that she was merely a dowry to me, £80,000 with a pleasant voice attached. He looked steadily down the table. "Half of you have repeated it. It was a good line. I have some regret at how good it was." My wife was standing in the doorway. She had brought me a corrected rent ledger, and a seed cake she had gone to my grandmother and the cook to find out how to make, because she was trying to please me, and she was 3 weeks into learning how. And she heard me say it, and then she said good night to the company very civilly, and asked us not to let the fire go out. Nobody at that table moved. Lady Sybil's face was a study. So here is the correction, and I ask you to repeat this with the same energy you gave the other, because I have found that a sentence goes round a county whether it is true or not, and one may as well choose which. The £80,000 is spent. Every penny of it went into that estate under her direction, and not mine, and there is not a man in this room who could have done what she did with it. I certainly could not. I had 4 years and 3 agents, and I nearly lost the whole. In September, the lower workings at Thrieve flooded with 19 men below, and I was 11 miles away at the sessions, and my wife had the pit yard organized, the Wigan fitter sent for, the Abbey kitchens opened, and the tithe barn made fit for the women before I had my boots on. All 19 came up. She crossed the last name off a list at 9:10 in the morning with her hands black to the elbow. He paused. And this month I conveyed the Thrieve field to her absolutely, in her own right, to do with as she pleases, which those of you who understand land will recognize as the whole earning value of Amberlyn. It is enrolled. It cannot be undone. I mention it not to be admired, but because I want it perfectly understood, in this room, and in every room you go into afterward, that whatever else is now true of my marriage, it is not possible for anybody ever again to say that the Duchess of Amberlyn came to me for my name, and I took her for her money. The arithmetic runs entirely the other way. I have made sure of it. He sat down. Rushmere got up in the silence with his glass and said, "To the Duchess of Amberlyn," and 30 people stood. It was in 3 newspapers by Wednesday, one of them offensively, and Dominic did not care in the least. Christmas Eve at Amberlyn came in with hard frost and a clear sky. He had done one further thing in the 12 weeks, and it was the only one he was nervous about, because it was small and it could be laughed at. In October, he had the kitchen chimney and the great oven at the Abbey pulled out and rebuilt by a man from Sheffield who understood flues. 11 days of dirt and 140 pounds, and Mrs. Ray in tears of joy on the 4th day when the new oven held an even heat for the first time in 60 years. He had told the household it was a repair. At 9 in the evening, he came into the yellow drawing room where his wife sat with the folded deed of separation on the table beside her and her hands in her lap. He was carrying the Amberlyn rent ledger and a plate, a seed cake cut on the everyday blue china. He set them down on the table by the door, squarely, aligning the ledger's edge with the edge of the wood, and then he came and stood in the middle of the room. "There are 2 errors in the 2nd column," he said. "I have marked them in pencil, not ink, in case I am wrong. I have been over that column 4 times, and I still cannot do it as fast as you did it in a doorway." Emmeline did not move. "The oven has been rebuilt," he said. "You told me on the 11th of October 2 years ago that the oven at Amberlyn had never been right. It is right now. That cake is the 4th one. The first 3 were failures, and I ate all of them, which Mrs. Ray considers the only sensible thing I have done since I came into the title." His voice was not steady. "Emmeline, it is Christmas Eve, and I gave you my word, and Lloyd is in the breakfast room with his pen and his clerk, and he will come in the moment you ring. I will sign it if you tell me to. But I am going to say the true sentence first, because I have owed it to you for 2 years and 2 months, and because you were right about the other one. It was the sentence that was there. This is the one that is there now." He came no closer. "You are not a dowry to me. You are the whole of my good fortune, and I did not earn any part of it. I loved you by the 6th week of our marriage, and had not the courage to say so in front of 2 men in a billiard room, and I have loved you every day of the 2 years you were unfailingly polite to me, which is a very particular kind of punishment, and I deserved every hour of it. I do not want the estate, I do not want the mine, you have the mine, and I am glad, and I hope you keep it whatever happens tonight. I want you at that table for 40 years, not to mend anything. There is nothing left to mend. You have mended it all, and I stand here with nothing to offer you but the man who said the thing, 2 years older and a great deal quieter." For a long moment there was only the fire. Then Emmeline Amberlyn picked up the folded deed from the table beside her, looked at it, and tore it once across, and once again, and dropped the pieces into the grate, where they went up in a bright, soft rush. "The oven," she said unsteadily. "You rebuilt the oven. It was 140 pounds and 11 days of soot," and Mrs. Ray cried. "Dominic," she was on her feet and crying and laughing at the same time, and her hands were fisted in the front of his coat. "You gave away the mine. You stood up at Rushmere's table and told 30 people what you said. And the thing that has undone me, the thing that has utterly undone me, is a seed cake on the blue china." "It is a little dry," he said. "The receipt is not easy." "It is not dry. I have had 3 pieces of the 3rd one. Mrs. Ray brought it up to me on Tuesday and swore me to secrecy, and I have been in a state ever since." She put her forehead against his chest. "Ask me again, not the deed, the other." "Stay," said the Duke of Amberlyn. "Stay, and come to the left at the top of the stairs, and be my wife instead of my duchess." "Yes," she said. They kept the 80,000 pounds out of every conversation for the rest of their lives, and the Threve field never came back into the Amberlyn estate. It stayed in her name for 41 years, and went, at her direction, to their second son, who improved it further and was insufferable about it. Lady Adeline lived to be 88 and took her granddaughter-in-law's arm at every tenant's dinner until the last one, always at the same deliberate pace. Josiah Hartright came south every August. He and his daughter went over the Amberlyn accounts together at the library table for a fortnight each year with the windows open, arguing about depreciation, and Dominic would sit in the corner with a book he was not reading and listen to the two of them, and think that he had once been fool enough to call it money. And every year on the 24th of December, in the yellow drawing room at Amberlyn, there was a seed cake, cut, on the everyday blue china, and the rent ledger beside it with 2 errors marked in pencil, put there by the Duke himself, who would allow nobody else to carry it in. His wife pointed out, the 5th or 6th year, that he was inventing the errors on purpose. "Certainly I am," he said. "It is the only part of the evening I am any good at."